All right, so in this video, we're going to create a simple top menu scene. Um, and this is sort of a great first step because we'll do a little bit of UI. We'll put some text on the screen, and we'll do a little bit of animation. So hitting two of our sort of goals for the project on the get-go. And it's pretty simple. And then one line of programming, basically, and we'll be all set. So first thing I want to do in this scene is I want to give myself a background. I don't really like this ugly blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate in my project window to sprites, scene sprites, where I've organized a sprite called noise 1. I'm going to drag and drop that in here. I could probably do at 0, 0, 0. The only thing that I really want is I want to make sure that it covers up the entire screen. So I've scaled it up to like 1.25, and that looks pretty good. So I have a little background here, and I want to make sure that my camera is orthographic. If you're using 2D settings, that'll default to this, but it'll be perspective if you accidentally hit 3D settings. So make sure that it is orthographic. So next I want to create our sort of title screen text. So if I go down, if I click create, hit UI, and find text here. The nice thing is that to work with any sort of user interface stuff, you need a canvas to work with. And if I don't already have a canvas, it will create a canvas and an event system for me. The event system sort of tracks certain sort of inputs, and you can do stuff with that. For this project, we won't really touch the event system. All right, so because I think that's mostly with navigating with a controller, so we'll be all right with that. All right, so if I select my text, I'm going to make it white just so we can see it. So I go down to color, click and drag that into white. And working with user interface elements is a little bit more complicated. This rect transform, if you remember, transforms like our noise here have a scale, rotation, and position, where this has a number of different elements that we can sort of manipulate. So we have a rotation and a scale, but our sort of position varies in this a little bit. So the reason it's a little bit more complicated is they've created the canvas in a way that if we're using different aspect ratios, like if I did 640 by 960, we can tell the UI element to scale in such a way that it fits any sort of screen. So if we have somebody who has a 16 by 10 screen and we still want the text to be right in the middle, we'll make sure the position is 0, 0. And the width and height are like that. We can put it we can select the middle line. So we can make sure the position is always the center of the screen. And even when we do 1920 by 1080, our resolution 1080 by 1920, it's still sort of in the middle of the screen. And now the text is going to look larger or smaller depending on our resolution size. So if we have a smaller resolution like this, then our text, because it has a specific font size, is going to look larger. But if we go into this font, sorry, I'm hitting undo. I want to go back to our resolution. And I select best fit here. If I toggle that on, then I can even sort of scale this up to have a larger height and a larger width, and up until, and I can even go in here and if I select this one here, this rect tool, then I can sort of manipulate it by hand. And now it's scaling up until a certain max size. So if I increase this max size like tenfold, then it's going to shrink or make large, or shrink or scale up depending on the size of the window that it's in. So it's doing best fit, so it's trying to give us the largest font size possible that'll fit in that space. So that's really useful. For our scene, I want it to basically take up the whole screen except for a little bit of space on the left and right, and the top and the bottom. So what I can do is I can change the anchor points so that they take up the entire screen. So there's a few ways I can do this. I can sort of manually manipulate them here. And let me point you to something that'll be useful for working with user interfaces. Is this button here, which if I hover over it, it's called raw edit mode. So if I have this deselected, when I change my anchor values 0011, it'll change my rect transform height and or values up here, so that the text stays the same. But if I undo that and I have that selected, then it won't do this anymore. It won't modify this at all. I can just simply, it'll scale up if I'm scaling up with the anchors. So if I do 0, 0, 1, and 1, then it's not manipulating this so that it looks the same on our screen. So that's what that little button does. So there's also like some presets. We had it on center before. Right now it's like a little off center because of this here. So I'm going to actually change the positions here and keep the height. If I zero this out and I have this selected, basically I want this completely 0 and I want this to take up the whole screen. So I want the X minimum to be 0. So you can see here the anchors went all the way to the left, and the X maximum to be 1. So the right anchors went all the way to the right. And the same for Y. So I want Y to be 0, Y is low, as low as the canvas size, and then all the way up to 1. And we can sort of like make it hit the center here by clicking this alignment button. So that's pretty nice. And can our text size get larger? I feel like we can fill it more if we wanted to. Maybe 300 is the max. All right, so I've actually, in my asset package, I've imported, if you look here, I've imported some fonts. And the font we're going to use for our menu screen text is one called Bonaco. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But there's a couple ways to change it. I can go here and hit this little circle button and select that. And we can look at like sort of the different other text that we have here. And I want to change the text to be the title of our project, which is Work the Telly. So this T here looks like a little bit too close to the left side of here. So what I can do is either I can change the anchor to be not at 0, 0, but at maybe like 0.1 or something like that. Or I can say, basically I want to give a pillow cushion of a certain specific amount of, let's say, like 50 for the left and 50 for the right. So now when I scale it, or when I have a different resolution, take us up the whole screen, but with the same fixed 50 amount, instead of scaling it specifically in a, I always select the wrong one. And we'll do the same for the top and bottom. That way the text doesn't get too close to the sides of our device. I do want to, I think I want to have like a subtitle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of duplicate this. And I want to just to say like to press the screen to start. So I'm going to do press screen or touch screen. Touch to start. I think that's good. Yutch, touch. And I want to have this like below our other text. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to, instead of having on our first text to be like 0, 0, 1, and 1, I'm going to make it so that the sort of bottom of the screen is left free for my second text. So I'm going to do like 0.75. Oh no, 2.5. So I want the anchor to be like somewhere at a quarter of the screen, and then this font will, just to make sure that they never overlap, is that I will make the maximum Y value 0.2. So I'll do, or 0.25. Yeah, I'll make the anchor values here the same. I want to align this one up though, so I'm going to hit this one, and I don't want a best fit for this. I think I want, or I can just I can scale it even further, just to like maybe like 0.1 to 0.25, because I want this text to be smaller than the text above it. I'm also going to change the font size to be this sort of like digital font here. That looks okay. And I want to, so now I want to change the colors of this font to sort of match what the rest of the game is going to be. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to delete this later, but I'm going to take one of these prefabs that are going to be in our main game scene, double click the camera so I can get into our scene view. I'm just going to click and drag and have her there. But basically I want it to be this purple and this green, and I want to match just for consistency, sort of that everything sort of comes together. So probably make this text a little bit more informative. I'm going to rename that title text, and like touch text. I don't know. So for this one, I want to make this one purple. So what I can do is I can use a dropper tool here. And I can select a color, make sure I don't hit the gray grid line, and then here I'm going to do the same with a dropper and select this sort of green. So that's sort of like a visual consistency. Now I can delete this old lady because I don't need her in my screen. Great, so that's our initial setup of our top menu screen. Next up is I'm going to make this a little more dynamic, add a couple animations, and then finally we'll do the programming so that this will move on to the next scene.